Welcome to the BILLWARD-LIFE-CAST, formerly the UDR-CAST. I'm Bill Ward, your host, and welcome to another edition of our podcast. I was just listening to the last episode just to kind of get caught up on where I want to carry on from here. As I've been doing these individual series going on, I've been taking some notes and writing out the messages or the influences of my recovery, of what's happened in my life to make that change happen, and what did I have to go through in that experience to learn the lesson that I learned. And as I've been reviewing many different intervals of my journey and looking at some of these things, other things are coming up, and I have a notebook that I have all these things in, and it's just been very interesting. I don't know where the notebook is right now, but they're still pretty fresh in my mind. And I think the topic of today's, as we finished off on last week's, which was Jay, letting me know after that second meeting that not to worry, and that he thinks that I'm going to help a lot of people. And this gentleman, Jay, he had traveled all over Canada doing some things and got to know the intricacies of our people, although he was a white guy. And he just observed and seen things. And he wanted maybe me to, help make a difference. And the thing about people in recovery, especially ones that are healthy, is they really want to make a difference. And they want to promote other people to be that spearhead. And at that time, he seemed like he wanted me to be that spearhead. Excuse me. And so as I kind of carry on from that part of the story, after that meeting, we were chatting, and he had said, if you'd like any help on moving your path forward, and he's like, I really think you can help your people. And I wasn't really sure what I could do to help my people because, like I've said before, I didn't really feel Indigenous. I didn't feel like, that part of me had been developed, and I felt like a fraud almost. But I did like the idea that maybe one day I could help our people, but I had no idea at this point what that would look like. And so he said, well, why don't you come over to my house and we'll kind of look at a game plan. We'll use a whiteboard or a flip chart, and we'll kind of lay out some things, and we'll at least talk about it. And, I thought that was a great idea. And so, a couple weeks later, we line it up. I head over to his house. He's got a nice basement office, technology all over the place. And he had a whiteboard already laid out. And we just started shooting the shit and talking, and he started showing me what he was thinking. And what he was thinking was far beyond where I was at that moment. I didn't know what I was doing from one moment to the next. And so as I looked at his whiteboard and he started pointing some things out, he's like, well, I think one of the items was message carrier. And he's like, you're the message carrier. And another item was you're raw and you're real, and you don't really cater to the system of how we're supposed to do this. And he's right. I didn't. And I still don't, I believe. In many respects, I'm learning how to kind of mold them together for maximum efficiency now. But back then, I was just pretty raw. And another thing that he had said was, you're going to take this message far and wide. And I said, okay, well, I've been thinking about, what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. And, maybe I should think about some business ideas or some names of companies or what the mission might be. And he's like, no, man, it's right here. And then he spells it out on the board, and he wrote my name. And he's like, that's the name. I'm like, well, I can't name my company Bill Ward. He's like, no, you're going to self-brand. And I was like, bro, that's pretty not humble. He's like, it doesn't matter about being humble, and it is humble because you're the guy that's carrying the message. And in many ways, it's you that they want to speak to. It's you that is doing this work. No one else is behind the scenes doing the things you're doing. And you seem to be, doing this in a way where you're attracting people to you. And he says, I can see and I can feel it in my bones, and how I see this rolling out is you're the message. So anyway, we had this chat in his office for probably like an hour. We went back and forth on many different things. And by the end of this meeting, I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. And I had to think about it because I didn't want a self-brand. I wanted to come up with a name of a company and just kind of be behind the scenes of that name. But he was adamant that I did this. And one of his angles was, the main angle was, you're going to help Indigenous people and Indigenous communities in Canada. That's how you're going to do this. And I said, I didn't know what that looked like. So I left, and it was rolling around through my mind many different times a day, and every time I would think about it, I was like, oh, that's not good. And, I think, and I'll say this out loud here right now, and, there's a lot of judgment in recovery. As much as we practice or try to let the world know that we're a spiritual basis of life when we're trying to live a different life, and, it's probably one of the most judgmental facets of our society is in 12-step recovery, because there are so many rules, and you got to be the certain way, and because of the traditions, you have to live this certain way, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I'm not saying any of that's bad, by no means. I think it's actually really, really good. But one of the indoctrinated beliefs that I think that I took on was, in order for me to be humble and to walk this path, I can't talk about myself or put myself center stage. I'm going back to year 3 of my recovery when I'm talking about this, somewhere around there. But as I'm sitting here, close to 12 years sober or recovered, I believe that humility, the definition of humility for me today in many respects is quite different. I believe if you know what you're good at and you accept that and you work with that within reason and not go full ego, and it's okay to know what you're good at. It's okay to step out of the box and carry your gifts with you, whatever those gifts might be. And to say, yeah, I am good at this. And so that's what I teach the people that I work with, whether it's in 12-step recovery or just, mentorship or coaching or whatever it is. Because I want my person to understand that they do have these qualities, and it's okay to say that you're okay at it and good at it. You just got to temper it with balance. And so, that's kind of what he was telling me. And in some ways, I knew it, right? When I ran my construction business, my landscaping business, I got good at many things, and I knew what I was good at. And I thrived on those things, and I knew what I wasn't good at, and I knew what I needed to work at. And, for example, I was really good with running full jobs. I would often be the guy with the rake running the whole job, and I would look like probably the bottom of the totem pole laborer. And then guys would come on site looking for me, or homeowners, or, contract managers, construction managers, whatever. And then my employees would look more like they ran the business than me, and the employee would say, no, that's Bill right there, the guy with the rake. And I knew I could run the job with a rake in my hand, and I did a great job. I could see everything. I was observing everything. And we owned heavy equipment like excavators, dump trucks, and skid steers, bobcats, and I knew that I wasn't very good on some of those pieces of equipment, which is why I had to have the right person in the job to do that job. And over, many, many years of slowly practicing, I became really good on a skid steer and moderately good on an excavator. And so I know with practice, no matter what it is, we can sharpen those skills and get good at whatever it is. So as I kind of get back to, the story is, I started on this journey. And I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what my next step was going to be. You know, I've shared, I'm pretty sure that I've shared about, you know, when I was going down this path and I didn't have a job, and I finally got a couple job opportunities. I had a job opportunity with Expert First Nations, who is now defunct, and I had another job opportunity with Jacobs Engineering. And this is at a time where I couldn't get a job. And as I contemplated each of these jobs as they finally came up in my world, my sponsor had told me, the way you should make your decision is, where can I be of maximum service to God and his kids? And at first I thought that was kind of a stupid way to make a decision on a job. Wouldn't I take the one with more money? But, you know, working my program and doing the things that I was doing, I kind of really considered what he had said. And even though the one in Morocco with Jacobs was much more appealing financially and status-wise, you know, I really weighed the pros and the cons of these jobs and my recovery and what I was doing. And I ended up taking the one with Expert First Nations. And that job ended up teaching me a lot of different things. What I was doing was I was going out to First Nations communities and I was interacting with the members and the chief and the council, and my mandate was to build pads, put in screw piles, put in the septic and cistern, grade the lots, and make sure that these lots and the screw piles were all set for modular homes to come in. A lot of times I had to do the grading to get these modular homes in because the trailers were so long and there was height restrictions, and I'd have to basically build roads to get these units in there. And the better at the job you are, the quicker these go. And so I got really good at that. And one of the things that it taught me was interacting with the First Nations people and the chief and councils, because I often had to deal with, you know, the chief from time to time, or some council members, or whoever it was. And I started spending a lot of time on the nations. And I started seeing some nations had money and some nations had nothing, but all nations seemed to have drug and alcohol addiction issues. And so I started kind of cutting my teeth there, and I spent a good amount of time working there. You know, I was probably there for about a year and a half. I was in Calgary for a couple days, and I'd head out for a week. I'd come back to Calgary for a couple days, head out for a week, and this went on for a year and a half. And I was kind of growing in my recovery. I'm still hitting meetings. I'm still sponsoring on the phone. I'm doing all these things. You know, at this time, I'm still pretty fresh about being away from my family. And I'm still learning hard, serious lessons along this journey. And one of the hardest lessons that I learned was, you know, through this period of time, I started dating this young lady. And this young lady was very attractive, and we hit it off, and things were going well. She didn't really like the fact that I was working out of town, and, you know, she was going on a holiday to another country, and I was just coming back to town from my last shift, and she wanted to see me and I wanted to see her, and I wasn't supposed to be back till, like, let's say on Thursday, but I ended up coming back on Wednesday. So I'd made a phone call and made a plan to meet with this lady, and we were going to spend time together, and it was a day before I actually planned on coming home. But I also had made plans with my daughters to see them on the Thursday. And so as I'm coming home early on the Wednesday, my one daughter calls me and she's like, "Hey Dad, how's it going?" And you got to remember, like, I'm trying to rebuild a very tumultuous relationship with my kids. I did not see my kids for basically the whole first year of my recovery. And now I'm maybe a year and a half to 2.5 years into my recovery. And we're kind of slowly rebuilding our relationship. and she wants to spend the time with me. So she calls me to ask me, if I'm for sure going to be home tomorrow. And I said, yep, tomorrow's going to be good. Yeah, I will be home tomorrow. Meanwhile, I'm almost back to Calgary right now. And so basically I'm being dishonest and I'm lying, which I didn't think was that big of a deal because I was just going to hang with my girlfriend and the next day I'd see my kids. Well, lies always kind of catch up with you. So I'd been talking to my dad earlier that day and I let him know that I was on my way home a little bit early and blah, 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 and didn't really think much of it. After I talked to my daughter, about 10 minutes later, I was like, holy shit, I told my dad I was coming home today, and I think my dad's hanging with my kids today. So anyway, right when I had that thought and I was going to kind of try to straighten out this lie, my phone rang. It was my other daughter. It was Lucy. And she got on the phone when I said hello, and she just started asking me these questions knowing I was lying. And she just started ripping me. And she's young, right? This was like 9 years ago. And she's just ripping me. You're going to lie to my sister, you piece of shit. Don't bother calling us. Don't talk to us. You're never going to change, all these kind of things. And just really, really hit my heart in the worst way ever. And then, eventually she hung up on me. And I'm just sitting there after this phone call and I got nothing. I did lie. I was withholding the truth. I did want to see my daughters, but I did want to see my girlfriend before she went out of country. And I didn't tell the truth, and the consequences of those actions resulted in my daughters not wanting to see me for a long time. So whatever amends or ground that I was building on getting these relationships back in order, it all got backtracked. I took many steps back on that action. I ended up talking to Shannon, my ex-wife, that same day shortly after. And she had called and she was like, you really screwed up. You really made a mistake. Your daughters are so mad at you right now. They might never want to see you again, kind of thing. And I knew that. And so, we had a good chat and she said, just keep doing what you're doing and hopefully they come around, but they're so mad at you right now. And she could relate, right? Shannon could relate because Shannon was very mad at me for a long time because of what I had done and what my addiction had done. And, it came around. But I think I learned something at that point. I make these decisions based in self that later place me in a position to be hurt, and I almost always hurt others. So I made a selfish, self-centered decision to tell a little white lie so I could see my girlfriend for a few extra hours. And that decision was based in my own selfishness. And then I carried out that lie on my phone call with Jillian, which was selfish because I wanted what I wanted and I didn't want to suffer a consequence of her giving me shit because I was going to go see somebody else ahead of her. So I was just compiling lies on lies, and as I make this decision based on self, I did later place myself and many others in the position to be hurt. And when I told my girlfriend about what had happened also, she was mad. And so I kind of pissed off everybody in my world. And that's what dishonesty does. It's very destructive. So anyway, I learned a lot out of that lesson. And that lesson, that little lesson that I just explained, it actually carried me forward in a good way into rigorous honesty. The word rigorous that I've learned in 12-step recovery means accurate honesty. So even though I can rationalize and justify pretty much any action that I do or inaction that I do, I need to really look at what am I saying, what am I thinking, what am I doing, and why am I doing it? Really not for the best of intention. I got to look at the motive. Is the motive selfish and fear-based? or is the motive in a good and kind and caring way? Am I going to be honest and really just tell the truth no matter what the consequences are? Yeah, that's how I try to do it today. And, it's worked well in my life since then. And am I perfect at it? Of course not, but I'm pretty good at it. So as I kind of move through that lesson and I get to the end of this job that I'm working with Expert on, I had an opportunity given to me from a friend of mine, Brandon, and he owned another company called Weatherskin Calgary. And he had been poaching me, asking me if I would come and work for them. And for like 6 months, I said, no, I'm good. And, as I'm getting along in this relationship with my lady friend and, I want to spend more time with my kids. And I kind of considered this relationship a little bit more, this job opportunity a little bit more. And eventually I said, yeah, let's talk. And then we sat down and we talked about it. And I eventually gave notice to Expert and I took this opportunity on the new job. And this new job paid me pretty good. It started me at least at what Expert finished me off at. And it allowed me opportunity to make more money and to progress in the organization and move my way up. And so I took this job. I was director of operations for a coatings company. And I spent the first year there, and after the first year review, there was definite signs that I had made a big difference. We had actually made some money, and we had a little bit of money in the bank, and things were going pretty good. And my leadership abilities were kind of shining through, and, I hired a couple of the right people, and things were good. And then about a year and a half into this job, and you got to remember, I'm still sponsoring. I'm still doing a lot of these things. I'm going to meetings. I'm shaping my message. I'm sharpening my intuition. I'm sharpening the message. I'm hanging out with really good people in recovery doing the same things that I'm doing. And, remember when I first came into recovery, the only thing I ever wanted was my job back and my old life back. And by all intents and purposes, that's exactly what I got. My career's rebuilding. I just bought a Mustang with a sunroof, and it was a beautiful car. Things were going really well. And then one day I'm just sitting at my desk. I'm doing the work. I'm about a year and a half into this position. I had just gotten a raise, new bonus structure. Now I'm making about $130,000 a year with my new bonus structure. Things are going really good. I'm sitting at my desk and I'm doing the things. And another thing I should tell you is I've never had a lot of passion for that job. Although I had a desire to do a good job, it wasn't passion that drove me in that job. It was, rebuilding my life and allowing me to look good and help the company. And I could do a lot of things the way that I wanted to, which was also attractive. But there wasn't a sure amount of passion in that job for me. So I'm sitting there, and one day it kind of dawns on me. It was almost like this. Just sitting there, and I have these two voices in my head. One of the voices says, bro, you can't do this fucking job anymore. And the other voice is on the other side of my head going, bro, this is all you ever wanted. You just wanted your job back, and you just wanted your career, and you wanted to make money again. And I'm like, yeah, but this ain't serving me anymore. I don't want to sell my soul for this job. And the other side's kind of like, well, you're not selling your soul, bro. You're paying your bills. You're paying your child support. You're doing the things. You're being responsible. You're rebuilding your life. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's all fine and dandy, says the other side. But you also ain't happy, and feels like you're selling your soul, and you already sold your soul for the money and the stuff once. Are you going to do it again? And that's kind of where the conversation ended in my mind, right? But there was something in me that was deep down inside that knew that I just couldn't do this job anymore, or this type of job in general, where I'm just working for the man and I'm making the man happy and I'm making the man money and, I'm making myself money and I'm buying nice things. Like that couldn't be my life again. I already lived that life. And the honest truth is I would see my cell phone beside me on my desk, and you know what? I couldn't wait for that thing to ring and another alcoholic or addict on the other end saying I'm in trouble, or this good thing happened to me. Thank God, recovery's beautiful. Look at the gifts. Like either way, I couldn't wait for something like that to happen when my phone would ring. And then 4:00 would come and I was pretty much off work, and one of my favorite things to do was like go sponsor, go help somebody, go take someone through a book, go take someone to a meeting, go make yourself useful. And I'm probably 3 years into this journey, somewhere in there, and I've been changing a lot. Family's starting to come back. I'm starting to see my anger's kind of straightening itself out. I'm not as angry. I have a little tolerance and patience for people that I didn't have. And I'm praying and I'm meditating. I'm quite a bit different than I was. And so I started praying and meditating, like, okay, on this job, like, what am I going to do? God, creator, grandmother, can you help me? Can you tell me? Can you show me what my next step is to be? And I don't think I had quite learned it at that time, but later on I learned that I could wait for the answers, and the 100% of the answer will come 100% of the time if I knew what to watch for and my intuition was sharpened. So in these months and years, I was just sharpening my intuition. And some of these decisions that I made early on were really critical in sharpening that intuition. And my intuition said, you can't do this job anymore. And so I was praying on that a lot, asking for guidance and direction. Then I remember it was about 2 weeks after I had that conversation with myself in my head. I'm on my way back to the office. My intuition said, pull your car over and lay your seat back and start talking to your dead grandma, which was my God, in regards to this situation that you have. So I pulled over my new Mustang, I put the seat back, and I started praying and talking to my grandmother. And I said, Grandma, I know that you're out there and you're listening to me and you know everything that's going on in my life. And you know that I don't really want to do this job, but I don't know what to do. I have all this child support payments, and I have my rent, and I have all these things that I need to pay for. But I just want to help alcoholics and addicts, but I also know there's no money in that, and so I don't really know what to do, and I'm having this conversation. And then, just like I'm speaking to you right now on this microphone, my grandmother spoke to me in my mind, and she said, Billy, it doesn't matter if there's money involved. That's what you do. You go help people. Don't worry about the money. I'll take care of that. And you know what? There was a knowing in me that just knew. And yeah, I had probably $4,000 or $5,000 a month in payments. I had $2,200 a month in child support. I had my rent. I had some other bills. And at that time, I was paying my bankruptcy off. And I started on that journey. And as I embarked on that part of the journey, I didn't know what I was doing. And as I kind of went along, I've shared other pieces of this journey on the other episode, where I was talking about, my friend B sitting in the chair and my friend J who's telling me to self-brand, and I'm using all of these experiences with these men who are really trying to guide me, shape me, and help me. I'm using these experiences to sharpen my intuition. And I don't really know what I'm doing. So as I kind of carry on with these two men, I remember one of the aspects of working with B was, he got me to do a reverse step 4. And it was like, well, why are you getting me to do a reverse step 4? He's like, well, I want you to find your path. I'm like, well, what's the point of a reverse step 4 and what is that anyway? He's like, well, It goes back into your life, into your childhood, and it shows you where your strengths are. And I'm like, okay. Because at this point, I've normally been looking at like where my weaknesses were. And so I did this reverse step 4. And I could see where my strengths were. He also gave me the direction to go get a book called Strengths-Based Leadership and take that test. And I took the test, and, you know, I could see some of my leadership qualities after I did that test. And so he's kind of like pumping me up. He's kind of like redirecting me in a bit of a different direction that I've never been directed in before. You know, and as I'm kind of working with B and J, Jay's kind of guiding me in the same way. He's letting me know what he can do for me and how he thinks I should move forward with this path. And, you know, and one of the things that he told me is, he said, you know, I think that you should get on the phone and start calling chiefs and health departments. And I'm like, chiefs and health departments? What do you mean? He's like, you know, when you start working towards your passion and what this dream is, it's going to involve First Nations. He's like, I think you should sit back and start calling chiefs and First Nations health directors and whatnot, and just let them know who you are and see if there's a need for you. And because I just trusted in what he said, I started doing that. I didn't believe in it, though. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe I had earned the right to do any workshops or speaker engagements, or I didn't even know what I was doing. But you know what I'm really good at? When I believe in somebody and they believe in me, I'm good at listening. So every morning I would smudge and I would get on the phone, and I didn't have a job at this point, and I would call First Nations all across Canada. I compiled a list of like 600 and some First Nations, and I started in BC. And I just called every single one, and I asked to talk to the chief or the health director. And when I first started doing it, I didn't really know what I was saying. I tried to build an elevator pitch. I tried to like build a little bit of a statement. But because I didn't believe in myself and what I was doing, it didn't probably come across very well. I knew that I was pretty good at what I was doing, but I hadn't honed my skill set to take this out into the world yet. But regardless, I was still making the calls. You know, there was one day I was so scared. I didn't know how to even speak. I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I had my smudge, and I smudged, and I prayed so hard, and I meditated, and I asked for pure strength, direction, and guidance, because I was really scared that day to make these calls. And I finally did it after about 15 minutes of prayer and meditation. And lo and behold, I made 6 calls that morning, and all 6 I spoke to a chief. And I was able to promote myself a little bit. I think I was just coming around to developing the company name, and I was just basically, you know, talking about myself, Bill Ward. And eventually, you know, I did get the name Bill Ward Life, and that's a story too. As I was kind of building out this idea, at some point Jim's like, okay, I want you to search for a domain, and I want you to build a website. And the domain is going to be billward.com, or it's going to be billwardlife. No, sorry. It's going to be billward.com or billward.ca. And so I started looking into that, and I found out that they were both taken. Billward.ca was a guy in Canada who sold weed, and billward.com was the singer for Black Sabbath. But it gave me some other options for some other domain names, and it was billward.life. And I was like, billward.life, I guess I can use that. And it kind of made sense, because I've changed my life, and I want to try to help other people change their lives. So billward.life it was. And so as I kind of moved along here, I had a friend of mine who I had helped years and years earlier get recovered and sober. And I called him up and I said, hey, I know you're a video guy and a graphic guy, and I'm wondering if you might want to help me figure out a graphic for my business. And he's like, okay, well, what's your business name? He's like, well, I said, it's Bill Ward. It's actually billward.life. And he's like, well, what's your target? I said, well, I want to at some point help First Nations people. He's like, okay, I'm going to do this for you. He's like, what else do you need? I said, well, I need a bunch of videos and I want to kind of start building something here. And he's like, I'll do all the videos and I'll build your platforms and I'll do all these things for you. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And so, within a week I had a logo. And the logo that you see me with today is the main logo that he built back then. And then I had Facebook. And he had tagged Facebook Changemaker. Whoa, that's a big name. Bill Ward, the Changemaker. Fuck, I was so scared of that Facebook page. And he had built billward.life on my Instagram and billward.life on YouTube. And so it all began. And I started doing this. He recorded a bunch of videos for me. He did the first few posts on Instagram, and my Facebook page just sat dormant. I was told that I needed to do some posting on my Facebook page, and the honest truth was, because I felt like there was no humility in me self-branding, I couldn't even post on my Facebook page. I don't think I put a post on my Facebook page for probably the first 2 years of having that page. I was so scared to self-brand myself. And under the scenes, like behind the scenes, as I'm in 12-step recovery, I'm kind of like being quiet about what I'm building. Nobody really knows. And I'm actually terrified of the judgment that I'm going to get, the social judgment, because I'm in recovery and now I'm helping people through basically what I've learned and unlearned. And I just didn't want to be judged. I'd been judging myself my whole life for being Native, and one of my biggest fears was being judged. But at least my friend was able to do the Instagram stuff, and I was able to start doing a little bit of Instagram, and I was building my own memes and, trying to get her out there a little bit and making these phone calls still meeting with my mentors, doing some of these deals, and I'm just trying. I'm just trying to move along on this path. And I'm getting broker, and I don't really have any money. At some point I had to get a job. And I didn't really want to get a job. I kind of wanted to get this business going and maybe make a little bit of money on the side through the business so I didn't have to get a job. But eventually I did. I had to get a job. And I got a job doing some coating work, coating driveways and coating some cultured stone, fake cement on outside of houses and doing things like that. I'd get a bucket of this sealer and I'd put it in my truck, and the truck that I had was a red 2-wheel drive Ford. I hated Fords, I hated 2-wheel drives, and I hated red. Just another example of creators giving me what I don't want, so I can learn a lesson of some sort. And I drove this truck around all over, and I would take these cans of sealant, and I would get these addresses, and I would clean off the driveway, and then I would go coat them. And I was coating, and eventually, after about 6 months of this, I wasn't feeling it, and I didn't know really what to do. I was making a bit of money. I was kind of feeling useful. I'm I'm a number of months away from these other jobs that were fairly lucrative, and it almost seems like I'm going backwards now because I'm doing these jobs and they're just kind of like half-assed jobs where I'm getting paid here and getting paid there, but I guess the mission didn't change, and I figured that I was stepping stones towards something, but there was no guarantees that these stones were stepping stones to anywhere. And in some ways, it almost felt like I was really going backwards in my career and in my path. And I did this job for about 6 months, and then I couldn't handle it anymore. I just didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like how the business was being operated and wasn't what I was expected to do. And, no harm, no foul on the guy who owned the business, but it just wasn't for me anymore. I felt again like I was selling my soul and I wasn't aligning with what I needed to do. And so I gave my notice in on that job, and then I was broke again and had no job. I'm probably a couple weeks distanced from that job, and I'm praying and I'm asking God and Creator to guide me on what my next step is to be. And I'm meditating a shitload back then, and one of the things that came to me in meditation was, bro, start up your landscaping again. Because I had been a professional landscaper for like 15 years. But I didn't have a truck and I didn't have any tools, and it just seemed like a ridiculous idea, but that's the answer that kind of came in my intuition was start your landscaping. And again, I didn't really question it. I didn't try to overthink it and go, well, you don't have what you need to be a landscaper. I just said, okay. And the first thing that came to me was Kijiji, and I put an ad on Kijiji, and what I'd learned in recovery was like, just be honest and vulnerable and don't say anything you can't do. And I said, okay, I'm going to put this ad in, and I typed it in on my phone, and it was like, honest, reliable, hardworking, professional landscaper, period, looking to beautify your yard. I will take care of all the labor and the hard work, and you supply the materials, and we'll beautify your life, or something like that. And I said serious inquiries only, and blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what else I put, but it was a pretty amazing ad. And then within 24 hours, I was booked for the whole summer. I had enough calls and enough people asking me to come and help them that I didn't have to keep the ad up at all. But the problem was I didn't have a truck. I had a piece of shit little beater worth $500. At that time. Because I had sold the red truck. Because I was so broke. I sold the red truck. And I bought a little piece of shit. And I started landscaping. And so I didn't have any money. So I borrowed like $50 from Shannon, and I went and bought a shovel, went and bought some garbage bags and a tarp. And I started landscaping. My very first job was a scrape up of a backyard and get rid of the grass and have it ready for them to lay their own sod for a couple days later. Normally I would use a few different tools, but this time I only had a spade, so I scraped up all the grass with a spade and I raked it up. I put it in garbage bags. I used a tarp in the back of my car, and I threw a lot of the grass in the back of my car on a tarp. And, a day later, I'm leaving this guy's house, and I said, okay, your job's done. Took some pictures, sent them to him. He sent me the money on e-transfer, and it was $200 what he sent me, maybe $250. And I leave his house with a hatchback full of grass on a tarp and 2 garbage bags on the back seat full of grass. And now I need to dump these bags somewhere. So I drive through this community. I find this old lot, and I open these garbage bags and I dump it on an old construction lot. And, from there, my sponsor, Trevor, had given me a call, and he said, hey, I heard you're starting a landscaping company. And I'm like, you did? He's like, I'm like, how did you hear that? It's only been like a couple days. He's like, people talk. He's like, I was wondering if I could talk to you. And I'm like, yeah, you can talk to me. What do you want to talk about? He's like, well, I want to talk to you about investing in your business. I'm like, really? So anyway, I met him the next day at a coffee shop, and I have a bunch of jobs lined up, and the next job is one where I need a truck. It's up in Tuscany, and I got to bring in materials and take out materials and blah, 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 blah. And so I end up meeting with Trevor, and he's like, how can I help you? I'm like, well, I didn't really think about how you could help me. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but he's like, I want to invest in your company. He's like, I'm your sponsor. I know what you're capable of. What do you think about maybe I can help you with some money or a vehicle or something? I said, well, I need a truck. And he said, okay, let's look up trucks. So he looks up trucks right then and there, and he finds the first truck that pops up on his Kijiji is a Chevy GMC 2500 with a roll tarp, crew cab, extended cab. And I'm like, that's perfect, man. He's like, it's $3,000. Here you go. Go buy this truck. So I called the guy, and I go buy this truck. And, the next day I'm working in Tuscany doing another decent job. And I spent the next, 4 months doing landscaping. Ended up hiring my daughters at some point, and we got to spend probably at least a good month working together. And, by the time the end of the season came, by the end of September, beginning of October, I always, when I used to landscape, I never wanted to work into October. It was always cold. And so with my landscaping company, I always tried to shut it down in September, because once October hit, you never knew what you were getting. And if you have a whole bunch of money and product and, caught up into the winter and it comes quick, then you got to wait till spring to get it. So I tried to have everything wrapped up by the end of September, and that's what I did with this little landscaping business. I remember me and Lucy laying our last piece of sod on a job out in Okotoks. And then that was it. And the next day I went to a meeting. Went to a Saturday meeting, and my sponsor and I had ran into each other, and he said, hey, do you have time for a coffee after the meeting? And I'm like, yeah, I sure do. And, because he lent me the money for the truck, I've been making payments on the truck, and, it's been 4 months and I'm still not paid right up. And I let him know that I probably was going to take a little while to keep paying him because I didn't have any more work, and he was cool with that. And so we had a good chat, and I moved on with my day, and I'm leaving that meeting with him and our little appointment that we had together. And, lo and behold, my phone rings. The guy on the other end says, I own a concrete coating company, and I got your number from B. He says he knows you really well and that you're pretty smart and you got a good background in construction, and I'm wondering if you could come and run a job for me. And I'm like, what kind of job? He's like, a coating job. It's in the basement of a power facility. We need to coat the underground part of it. He's like, I want you to oversee it and supervise the whole thing. The job will take about a month. And I had just been out of work, and I could really use this job, and he was going to pay me a good rate, and I would be the supervisor on this whole site, and it was up in Edmonton. Yeah, it just kind of lined up perfectly. And why I love this story is because when you work for God and his kids, they work for you too. Everything's kind of aligning the way that it needs to as I follow the path, and I keep helping and asking for help. And I end up doing that job, and I was such a good influence in that community of that company that, the owner came to me and said, we want to keep you on after this job. And I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, I don't really know. I think we just want to keep you on as a mascot or a mentor, because you just seem to light up everybody's life and everyone loves you. So I just want to keep you on for company morale. But we got to figure out something that you can do. And I used to be a safety officer, right? I have an NCSO certification. And through that certification, I can build programs and do different things safety-wise. And so we decided that I would revamp the safety program. And so that's what I did. He would pay me $50 an hour, and that turned out to be some pretty good money. And I did that for basically October and December. And then as that kind of came down to an end, made it into January, and then somebody else came along. And that somebody else came along, started helping me financially. And how that even happened was I had another gig to do some other safety program work. And this other person was like, well, no, what about your path? Like, we need to keep you working on what you're working on. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to keep paying my bills too. And they said, well, don't worry about your bills. I'll lend you a bit of money and we can kind of keep you afloat. But let's kind of focus on what you're focused on, getting this business going. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And so, one of my greatest deficits of a human was always accepting help. I could never accept help. And so when I was first introduced to this person and they wanted to help me with financial ways, I couldn't accept it. And I remember this person saying, well, you need to work on that because receiving is part of giving and it's a full circle thing. And if you can't receive, then you're going to break the circle. And so I did a little bit of digging on that and reciprocation and gifting and these kinds of things. And she was right. She was right. I had to do it that way. And so I started letting somebody else help me financially. And that wasn't easy. And I thought it was going to be for a month. And then as I'm kind of going down this path, another guy calls me and he says, what's your bank account number? I'm like, why? He's like, I want to drop money in your account. I'm going to drop $1,000 in your account every month. I'm like, why? He's like, because you just do so many things and I just want to donate and help in whatever way I can. And I have lots of money. So can you let me do that? Me and my wife. And I was like, wow. So I gave my bank account number, and next thing you know, they were dropping $1,000 into my account every week. And somebody else was helping me out financially. And, I started learning a lot about the spiritual principle of reciprocation. And I had already been learning to just give away my last few dollars. A lot of times I would have $5 or $3, and as long as I put it in the basket at 12-Step Fellowship or I gave it to somebody, I always found a way to eat. And so I started learning that, just work for God and His kids. Don't worry about the rest. And that's what I did. And so from here, I'm going to lead into another segue, but I'm going to leave it here for now, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.